Okay. So I've copied my preferences. I'm inside Maya, and we're starting something brand new. Does anyone remember what the first thing we need to do is?
Set project.
Okay, but we're making a new one, right? Okay, so we have to make a new project. So we're going to go to File and go to the Project window and make a brand new project. Okay, after this, then every time we come in, we would set our project. So we go to File, we go to Project window, we click the New button, we give it a name, and just like as always, put your name inside the name, and then I'm going to put this as TitleSequence. And then I'm going to put Monday, Wednesday. You don't need to put Monday, Wednesday. Also, make sure it goes into your folder. So mine's going into P Sarcona 2510 work. Okay. So File, Project window, hit the New button, give it a name, Sarcona _ TitleSequence. Make sure it goes in your location, then hit Accept.
Thank you.
Okay.
What's the title we're supposed to give it?
So I want to show you the process for creating this very, very quickly, just so you can see how we would do it. And then again, we'll rewind and we'll step back through that thing. Okay. So in Maya, there's several ways to create text. One of the ways is just create text, and we go to the option box. Most things now, if you're not sure about it, go to the option box. Or just go to the option box all the time, and then you'll know. You'll know what's there and what's available. Okay, so this isn't the follow along part. All I'm doing is just picking the stuff that I want to have set up in my scene, and then I'm making the text really quick just so you can see where we're going to end up with this. And then we'll go through this together. There we go. Okay, so that's the process for creating the text. Now, let's all do that together. Okay, so we're going to go to Create. Maya's thinking. There we go. We're going to go to Create Text option box. For our first word, just so that we're all on the same page, we're going to do Gotham, okay, as our first word. You will pick your own word after and redo all these steps. You will redo and repeat all these things so that you know how to do it. Doing it one time in the middle of a semester on a Wednesday does not consider you able to do those things. You need to redo and redo and redo them, okay? So we are going to choose the word Gotham, all capitals. Everyone knows what all capitals mean? Okay. I said that yesterday and several people didn't. Okay, so all caps Gotham. If you don't know how to spell it, Gotham.
Yeah.
Bam. So we're going to make it as curves, and then we're going to click the little arrow on the far right side of font. All right, now the default font is Times New Roman. That's a default Windows font. I think on Mac it might be Helvetica. I'm not sure. I don't care. So what we want to do is find a font that's going to work with us. Okay, some of the fonts will not work just because they're too crazy. If you choose like Wingdings, obviously it doesn't say Gotham anymore. It just says random shapes or Webdings. But some of these like this Vladimir script, because there's some areas that are super duper thin and pointy, the process to make this into a surface will not work. Okay. So just to test it out as a group, we're just going to choose Arial, okay? So choose Arial, bold 72. Arial, bold 72. And then you can hit OK, and then you can hit Create. Arial, bold 72. We hit Create. We hit OK. We should have the word Gotham right to the direct right of our origin. And we can zoom in and get a little closer to it. Once we have our curves, we can convert the curves into an actual surface. Even though we've used the Create Text tool to make curves, there's other ways that we can use curves, which we'll find out later in the semester. But curves are basically just like a good building block to start off of something, okay? Kind of like Illustrator, drawing paths, that's what we're seeing. So I want to grab one letter. I'm going to grab the G. The nice thing about starting with the G is that it's all one piece, as in the O, which is like 2 circles around, and the A, which is 2 curves around. So I'm grabbing the G, and I'm going to hit F to frame it. See? Our hotkeys come in handy. Under surfaces, so remember we have this menu up here that we can change to modeling. So under the modeling menu, we're going to go to surfaces. And we're going to go down to the Bevel Plus option box. Make sure you go to the option box. Bevel Plus. Okay. So you might remember when we did our desk and our chair, we used a bevel, right? And that took this square surface and then it made it kind of soft, right? So it had a little curve on it. This Bevel Plus is a way to take a curve and make it into a 3D piece of geometry and control how the edges are. There is a bevel here. That's like the stupid one that just gives you square edges. It doesn't even bevel it. It's just ridiculous. So we go to Bevel Plus. Now in here, there's a bunch of options. Okay, so it says at start, at end, here's some widths, some extrude distances, here's the style, everything. Here's some output options. Before we go into this and we start tweaking stuff, we want to get it back to the default settings. So under Edit, and this is in every menu, we want to hit Reset Settings, and that's inside this little floating box that just popped up. Okay, so we go to Edit and we reset our settings. That way, our settings are all the same because they're all back to the default settings. Okay, so to get to this box, we went to Surfaces, we went to Bevel Plus, Option Box, we went to Edit, we reset our settings. I don't know why those are moving, it's just right there. And what we need to do is all of these we are going to play with after. So all that front stuff we'll play with after. The other one that's here, I want to play with now. Okay? So I want to make sure that this is set to polygons and sampling, which it should be by default. Okay, so you click the output options, and you should have polygons and sampling. And then in here, I think these two should be good. So the section and span, those two should be good. So if you're say section 2, span 6, that should be good. Everyone's good? Excellent. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to keep this box open and then see the G. So if I hold down Alt, I can move this around so I can see the G and scoot my box over so it's all the way out to the side. Okay, I want to see both at the same time. You can also scoot your Bevel Plus options off the screen if that makes it easier for you to see all your stuff. I can't do that. All right, so then we're going to hit Apply. Okay, and what we should get is our G now becomes a solid shape, right? Everyone's G is a solid shape. It looks awesome. All right, so yesterday when people were doing this, some people's options, because they didn't load their preferences, they loaded the person before them's preferences, the G came in, I don't know if it's like this. I'll just make it ridiculous, like that. Okay, the G came in like that, and obviously that was not correct because they were dealing with someone else's preferences. Having the correct settings guide you to success in these things. So I always like to reset the settings. That way I'm at the optimal settings for this tool and then go, okay? So we didn't change a single thing. We just verified that these items were checked. Everyone's cool. All right, so now I can close this Bevel Plus options window. Yes, sir. If my lettering is super tiny, all those settings that were inside it are not going to apply to this, okay? So if I was in my font and I chose, just to make it obvious, 6, and I had Tiny Gotham right here, and I went to Surfaces and I did Bevel Plus, okay? Because those sizes are not relative. It's not saying, okay, shrink it in a little bit. It's saying shrink it in an inch, and an inch for that guy is ridiculously big. There we go. All right, so we hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor. And the attribute editor has tabs. Remember, that's where we edit all of our settings for our material when we had materials. So one of these tabs is called Bevel Plus. That's what we just did. We just did a Bevel Plus. I want to edit the Bevel Plus options. So I'm going to click on the Bevel Plus options. So inside the Bevel Plus options, here's all those things. So here's bevel at the start. You see it goes away. bevel at the end, which is the other side. I don't know why the start would get rid of both. Oh, it didn't. It just shrunk that side. Okay. We could play with the bevel width. We can play with the bevel depth. We can play with the extrude distance. And I don't expect you to remember everything of what we're doing on each one of these items, okay? All I expect you to do is be able to get to this spot and be able to play with these things until you get happy results, okay? So as I look at this, I want to see what are these things doing. I know what they do, but bevel width is this. How tall is this bevel right here? How deep is that bevel there? And then the extrude distance is that little strip right here. That's how thick that is. So if I change that, that'll change just the extrude distance without affecting the actual bevel. So I can create some very cool things. If I go like this, you'll see that now I have kind of like this pointier looking G. Okay? So we're going to play with those a little bit afterwards. In your own letter, you can play with it as much as you want. I want to adjust what this edge looks like. The original Gotham one, it picked up some really nice lighting around the edges. This one wouldn't do that. This one, there's a sharp corner right there, and that sharp corner would not pick up light nicely. So what I want to do is have something that's a little more round, something that can catch the light a little bit better. So that all has to do with this outer style curve right here. So if I go to my outer style curve, you see that on the far right there's a little box with an arrow. I click the box with an arrow, and it opens up this window. Okay? Now, just so you can see how else to get to that, if I just click on this object, one of these other tabs up here is outer style curve. It's exactly what it took you to. Okay? So all of those little boxes with arrows take you to other things it's connected to. Usually it's easiest just to go up here. Just go up here, see if it's there. If it's not, then find it some other way. So this is the different styles, the different profiles of curve or shape that we can add to that. So if you just click on it and then use your down arrow, you can actually just cycle through all the different looks that we have. Okay? So one of the things is I can't click on this and then use my arrows here. I have to click on it to kind of close the box, and then that whole process works. Okay, it's kind of weird, but whatever. I like concave out. So I'm going to go to concave out, and then I'm going to go back to my bevel plus, and then I could tweak the size of this. So you see if I go this way, it goes inwards. I go that way, it goes outward. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it at that. It doesn't matter for now. You can adjust your settings on your final one when you want to adjust your settings on your final one. So I'm looking at these. Now I want you to see what this is going to do. Do you see this little cove right here where this is dipped in? Our light is going to shine and it's going to hit that cove, and it's going to create a nice little rim around it because the light basically is like trapped in that little thing. If it's perfectly square, it'll just bounce right off and we won't see any light right there. So I want to have this little cove so that it dips in right there. Okay, so now whatever my settings are, I need to write those down. So I'm going to bring up WordPad. Where are you at? There you are. And I'm going to type in bevel width 0.073. You don't have to do it for this one, but your other one you will, just so they're all the same. And then my outer style curve is concave out. Okay? So I write down these 4 things because when I do all my other letters, I need to make sure that they're all the same. Because otherwise, the letter would have different settings and it would look weird. Okay? All right, so we have our stuff written down. Even if you're close, whatever. Eventually you'll have to write it down for your other one. So then I can set this off my other screen. And I'm going to go to my next letter. Okay, so now this is another one of those things where Maya can be kind of finicky. Because we have an O and we have 2 curves, we have to know like what's the inside and what's the outside. Obviously we're human and we can look at it and know that that's supposed to be the inside and this is supposed to be the outside, but how is Maya supposed to know that? So if I grab it in the correct order, which is outside then inside, so shift click that one, then it will know that's the inside. I'm going to cut that out. Otherwise, it's just going to give us an error. So make sure that you select the outside part of the O and then shift grab the middle part of the O. Okay, now for future, if you didn't remember that and you try to do a bevel plus and it errors out, then you know. Switch the order that I have those selected. That's all you have to know. Okay. So now we're going to go back to bevel plus option box. Punch in our settings that we have. 0.073. There we go. And then you can verify that your stuff looks the same. Now mine didn't look the same. I can fix that after. Okay, I think I have some settings in there that are just not translating, so I'll fix that after. Then I can grab the T and hit apply. Grab the H, hit apply. Grab the A, outer then inner, hit apply. Grab the M, hit apply. All right, so now that we look at this, you can see that some of my letters are not exactly the same. And it could be several things happening here, okay? So one of the things that could be happening, I'm going to go to the attribute editor. I'm going to hit copy tab. This is kind of a neat thing. I can copy my tab here, and that's like a copy of these settings. And I can open up a new window, and then I can compare side by side. This is one letter, this is the other letter. Is everything the same? Dropping stuff. And you'll see that one of the things that changed is on my new letter, the method for the polygon options somehow defaulted to count. And this is it's just a glitch in the software that sometimes it'll do that and sometimes it won't. So then if I change that to sampling, and then I make sure that these settings are the same, extrusion distance and curve span, you'll see that I get the same exact letter settings. Okay? So that's what I have to do, is just make sure now that all of them have that same exact thing on them. So I would go to my next letter. Oops, close that window. Change this to sampling, extrusion section, curve span. Go to my next one, sampling, extrusion section, curve span. Sampling, extrusion section, curve span. And that's in the polygon output options. Okay. Now, if we look at this, if you look at my O, because it's really obvious on the O. Do you see how horrible the O looks, especially if we get up close to it? See how blocky it is? How faceted it is going around it? That's a no-no. I can't have that, especially how close we're going to get to it. We start off kind of back here and get close to it, so I don't want to see these harsh edges. They might be hidden, but I don't want to take a chance. Okay? Especially the O because of where it's at. The G somehow doesn't have that at all, but the O does. So on the O, if I go to the attribute editor, that's not mine. We need a soundtrack. So on the O, in the polygon output options, I have extrusion section, which is this direction here, and then I have curve span, which is this direction. So as I increase my curve span, you see how it adds more divisions going around, and it makes that O nice and smooth. So that's what I want to do. Hit Control A to get the attribute editor, go to the bevel plus, polygon output, and increase that curve span number so that it's nice and round. Okay? So that's looking pretty good. Everything's uniform. I always look at it from several different directions too. Sometimes, and it's a rare thing, the letters will actually extrude the other way, so they extrude like forward. So your letters wouldn't be like in a straight line. You might get one of the letters is like over here for some reason.
Where did you go for that?
Control A to get the attribute editor. And then on your bevel plus, we go down to the polygon output options. And then you can just pull up that curve span. So anything that's round, I always check that. Always look at it from every angle, because when you get to these later steps, we don't want to have to redo some of this. Okay, we want to make sure our letters are perfect the way they are. All right. So now some other stuff, just so you can see it. If I were to grab all of these letters here and I go to the attribute editor, this is only showing me the bevel plus for one of those items. Okay, so whichever item I selected last, it shows me the attribute editor for that. The channel box, though, over here will show me multiple objects. Okay, so even though this says bevel polygon 6, do you see how we see the 3 dots here? That means I have other stuff selected. So if I scroll down to my bevel plus, scroll over here a little bit so I can see it. You don't need to do this, I'm just going to show it, is that I can take that extrude depth and make it bigger on all of them without having to go into each attribute editor and change them manually. Some options are there, some aren't. So like those polygon options are not anywhere in this list, but the outer style curve is, so I could switch all my outer style curves at the same time if I wanted to. Okay, so just so you're aware of it, there's that spot to adjust things. The other thing to pay attention to, let's say on these letters, I wanted to move them. So I grab all my letters, Control S and save your stuff real quick. Sarcona underscore title sequence underscore 01. Before we do anything crazy, we like to save our stuff. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I've saved my file in case it crashes on me. I've grabbed everything. Watch what happens when I move my lettering. Okay. So any guesses why that's happening? Sir? Right. So the shapes and the shapes and the curves are separate things. But how we created them was we made a curve and we told that curve to become a shape. So if I were to click on the shape and just move the shape, it moves fine. If I were to click on the curve and move that, you'll see that it also moves the shape because it's remembering you use this curve to make that shape. So wherever you move that curve, that shape's going to follow. So when I marquee both, though, I get this like double movement because it's moving the shape and the curve's moving the shape again. So just be aware that that will happen, and our fix for it is just to delete history. So if we click on the delete history button, it would go away, and it wouldn't do that anymore, and our system would actually work a bit quicker. So let's grab our lettering, grab the whole mess, everything that's on that screen, and just hit the delete history button. Okay. The other thing that could happen is, let's say you're on a Mac and you've chosen Helvetica, and then you come to the school, which we don't have Helvetica on these, I don't believe. Your font would go away, your text would go away. Because it doesn't read Helvetica, it would just disappear. Okay. Now there are ways too, as we create text, there's Gotham that's tiny, right? That I could go into this. Is that this one? There it is. And I could edit the word. Hello. And then because it's not perfect, you see I got mother. Got mother. I don't know how I figured that out. Okay, and then here's Gotham again, but I typed in goodbye. So it's not perfect in how that works. So it's always best, we're done modeling, our text looks fine, let's delete the history and not have to worry about any of that stuff. Because that's the kind of thing where you're like ready to render and you open it up and your text is gone, okay, because it just didn't calculate. All right. So in our last assignment, we modeled the stuff all at once, and then we textured all the stuff at once. We're not modeling anything else in the scene, but if we were, I would model that after. So I like to model texture sometimes. Sometimes I model a bunch of stuff and then texture a bunch of stuff. So for this one, we're just going to go right into the texturing part. So I'm going to grab all these letters here, and we're going to assign a material. What kind of material should we assign to this? Mila, whatever you want to call it. So assign new materials. Now we can't, this is one of the things, before we were right clicking, right? We would right click and we would go down to assign new material. Sometimes this doesn't assign it to everything. It only assigns it to the last item we have selected. So we don't use the right click, we hold the spacebar down, okay? So we hold the spacebar down and go down to the bottom left where it says lighting and shading, and that's where we have that assign new material button. And this will assign it to everything, okay? So hold the spacebar down, lighting and shading on the bottom left, assign new material, and then from here we can pick our Myela. What does it look like? Like rusty metal plates, something like that. So how would we get this to look like metal plates? How do we get something else inside of our scene to look like something besides a flat color? A texture. Okay, so we're going to go to textures.com .org/hyphen textures.com, and we're going to find a picture of metal that we can use for this piece. So I'm going to log in with my stuff. I'm going to type in metal and find a good metal texture. Remember to try to think of what this actually could be made out of. You don't want to grab something that would be just totally opposite of what it is, like shipping crates. That doesn't make sense. And I have to use. And for some reason up here, the Internet Explorer does not download stuff, so I have to switch to Chrome. What?
We just pick whatever.
Yeah, just pick whatever. You pick whatever texture. When you do yours, then you can find the actual one you want. This is, again, it's the dry run. Everything else is going to be the same. It's just a matter of you picking the exact texture you want for yours. I'm picking this rusty paint one I like. And then which folder should we put this rusty paint or whatever texture it is in? Source images. Not source, but source images. All right, so now we jump back into Maya. And in order to get this onto here, what button do we need to click?
The checkerboard one of the color.
Yep, the colors checkerboard. So we click on the checkerboard on the far right of the color. And then we load in a file. And then we go to the folder. And then we click Rusty Paint. And then we save our file. And then we can hit 6. And we should be able to see it. So what we need to do is we need to fix that picture. So remember before, how before we had the picture that we put on the picture frame and it didn't lay out correctly, okay? So we have a 2D image, we have a 3D object, and Maya doesn't know how to put that picture on there. Imagine we had a picture of the Earth, how would it know to wrap around correctly and not go this way or that way? Or what if we put it on a cube or a cylinder, how would it know how to wrap around? So what we have to do is tell it what to do. So just so you can see some of these options up here, under UV, that's what we're going to be manipulating, the UV. Basically, the texture coordinates are called UVs. We should know that from our test today. We have a different kind of mapping. So before we use planar, which is basically like the projector screen, it projects the texture on there, just like a flat plane of what it looks like. So if I had a projector screen and I wanted to look like this picture, I could project the texture right onto this thing. But if I had something like my Mountain Dew bottle and I wanted it to project all the way around it like that, I might use something like cylinder. And if I had something that was spherical, I would choose something like spherical, okay? So those are the 3 basic ones that you would typically use for those 3 basic objects. So which one of those should we use for the letters? None of those. Okay, none of those fit what we're doing here. All right, there's another one called automatic. And what automatic does is it planar maps it from 6 different views. Okay, so stuff that's facing one way gets this one, stuff that's facing another way gets that one, and it basically just like lays everything out flat. So if we grab our letters and then go to UV automatic, we should see that our texture on there places a lot nicer. Sorry, a lot more nicer. There we go. Okay, so now we can actually see our texture. Now, every polygon object, if you just get this into the mindset, every polygon object that you put a texture onto needs to have some sort of UV manipulation, with the exception of a flat plane. If I just made a plane and I dropped a picture on it, I don't need to tweak anything. But if I have something like this, I need to tweak those settings. So you'll also notice that this put me into into component mode, so everything's blue. So I'm just going to hit F8 to get back to object mode. Okay, so now that looks pretty good. I don't think on mine I even want to adjust it, but I always like to adjust things to see what does it look like. All right, and sometimes the just looking at it with some adjustments, you'll see like, oh yeah, that definitely does look better. Okay, and it takes like 2 seconds to do. So I want to adjust this because right now I think this texture maybe is too big. Okay, so if this is zooming in really close, this little pit of metal doesn't look like a pit of metal. It looks like a big wad of metal, like missing from it, or a big wad of rust. So if I make it smaller, it might look like a scratch or a scuff or something on there. So I'm going to click on any one of my letters. And in the attribute editor, I keep this thing open like all the time, usually on the other screen. I click on my letter. It loads it into the attribute editor. I go to my far right arrow. So on the far right, here's my Mila. If I click on my Mila, I want to get back to the texture. So if you see, here's our color. Our checkerboard is gone. We just have an arrow. So I'm going to click on that arrow. And this will get me back to that material or that file. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to edit what this file looks like. So in this area here, there's not a whole lot to play with in what I want to do. That's why we have this extra tab. This is how that texture is getting placed. So I click on that place 2D texture, and then I can go to repeat, and I could type in like 5 and 5. And what that's going to do is it's going to repeat my texture 5 times this way and 5 times that way. Okay, so go to your place 2D texture and add a couple repeats in there and see what it looks like. I actually do like the way mine looks like that. All right, so we're going to take a detour real quick just so you can see this. Now my texture, it looks pretty good with it like this. What I'm not, Photoshop is just lightning quick. Now what's happening is we're repeating this. So imagine that we have this texture, and then we're taking it and having that texture right here, and then we're having that texture right here, and that goes 5 times this way and 5 times that way. So what could happen is that if the left side of my texture is blue and the right side is red, when that repeats, now I have this big line of blue and red going down the middle. Okay, this weird line. So typically I would correct that. On mine, it doesn't look like there's actually a problem. So I'm going to jump to work, Monday, Wednesday, source images. So I'm just showing you how to do this so that you can see it. But let's say I needed this texture here to be tileable without seeing a big line going down the middle. Actually, let me open up my other one. This is the one from Tuesday, Thursday. That one. Okay? So on this one, if I were to tile this, you can see this big dark line and how these pads are a different color than those pads. I would definitely see that happening. Okay? And you can preview all of your kind of tiling under Filter, Other, Offset, and see how I can offset this texture and see what it would look like when one side is butted up against the other. you see a definite line right here and a definite line right there. So if I wanted to use this as a tileable texture, I need to fix that, because otherwise it's going to look horrible. All right, so closed it. What? Sure. So let me see how bad it is on this rusted paint. So I'm going to go to Filter, Other Offset. And you can see in here it's not horrible. I don't really see a vertical one. I think it's right here. Okay? Because this is actually like the way it is, I don't really see that. So what I would want to do is I want to correct that. I want to clean that up. So I go to my rubber stamp, or my clone stamp. I Alt-click, and then I could airbrush this back in. And then just clean up some of these spots that look kind of weird. This flow might need to come up a little bit. My brush hardness might need to come up a little bit. Okay, so what I'm doing is just kind of getting rid of all the defining characteristics of this that would make it look like it's being tiled. Now in the process of that, I kind of ruined some of these lines. Let me undo right there. There we go. Because it has lines, I got to be a little bit more careful about that. All right, there we go. So that took care of that. All right, so there we go. Shrink this down a little bit, brush that in. Cool. So now if I go back and I offset, now I can see that I don't really see a hard line going down the middle of anywhere. Okay? So I'm going to save this as. Now, just like we talked about when we were making our movie, if I save a JPEG over and over and over again, it gets worse and worse and worse in quality. Okay? So these give me JPEGs because they're small. That's the only reason they give them to me. But I save all my textures that I've modified as a TIFF. So this would be my rust metal TIFF. So now I can go back to Maya, go back to my file, load in my rust metal TIFF, and now I should have just a cleaner version of my texture. Okay? You'll find a lot of the textures that are on textures.com are really nice. They're usually pretty high resolution, but all of them are not tileable, especially like if you found something, there you go, like this. This top is never going to match up with that bottom. There's just no way. This, I don't know why you tile that, but that wouldn't match either. Okay, if you go to the woods, especially the woods, there's a lot of them inside there that just wouldn't tile very nicely, especially because of how their coloring is from one side to the other. All right, so you always want to look at that and see, here we go, look at that. Now this one says on here seamless, so if I click on it, they have a seamless preview, so you could actually preview what does this look like. That doesn't look seamless. Seamless left and right, sure, but not top to bottom. Okay, this is for a fence anyway, so you wouldn't really tile it up and down. All right, so that's where we could go into Photoshop and tweak this. If I didn't like the color of this, I don't like it too goldy or brown, go into Photoshop, knock the saturation down, adjust my levels or curves or whatever, and now I have more of a metal color. Okay. You could also use this to build your own textures too. There's people, their job is just to build textures. Very cool stuff. All right, so we have this. So now our last thing we're going to do together is we're going to make the lights, or the lights and the camera setup. So we'll do the camera first. So I want to not use my perspective because my perspective is the one I work in. I want to make a brand new camera and set up everything in my brand new camera. So under Panels, Perspective, we make a new camera. And we name our camera Render Cam. Hopefully if you had issues on the mini room not naming your camera, you figured it out and how to name it correctly. Okay, so you don't have perspective 1, 2, 3, 4, 20. Okay, so we have Panels, Perspective New. That makes a brand new camera. We name it Render Cam so we know which camera we're going to be rendering. And then what we want to do is adjust what this is looking like. Okay, now this Gotham word is supposed to be huge, right? Like the idea in it is that the lettering is just enormous and we're kind of flying into the city. So I want it to look huge on my screen. Down here in your channel box, there's a thing called focal length. And this is very much a similar type thing to focal length on a regular camera. If I set this to 20, you can see how I'm going to get a different perspective where this makes the letters seem enormous. Okay, if I really go crazy and set it to 5, you can see how big the letters look even. Okay, so I typically wouldn't go to 5 because I think that might be too much, especially how deep these letters now look. Maybe I'll go to 10. There we go. Yeah, 10 seems like a good number. Okay, so I made my new camera, panels, perspective, new, named it render cam, set my focal length to 10. Okay, and you'll have to scroll down to get it. If you accidentally deselect your camera, we can use the outliner and grab render cam. Or we can just click on this button, which is select camera. Okay, so now we have our camera settings there. We just need to animate it now. Before we do any animating on a camera, I need to line up my camera's resolution gate. Okay, so this box that's up here, remember the little blue circle under show? We click that blue circle so we get our resolution gate so we can see exactly what's going to render. Okay, now you can disregard. On mine, I see a white thing on top of this. On some of yours, as I'm looking around, don't have that. Doesn't matter. Yours is just going to go right to the top of your screen. Okay, so we click the little blue circle to turn that on so we can see what's going to render. All right, so how long should this animation be?
10 seconds.
10 seconds is too long. 6? All right, 6 sounds good. The other class said 7. We're going to go with 6 though. So how many frames do we need?
30 times 6. 180.
Right, 30. If we were going 30 frames a second, we would go 180. We're actually going to do less than that though. We're going to go 24 frames a second. So 24 times 6, 144. Okay? So if we go down to our timeline, we have this 120 and 200 on the right. We're going to make both of those 144. Okay? That way our work area and our timeline is 144. Okay? So 1 is the start, 144 is the end. All right, so the way I like to do this is instead of starting really far back and then zooming in, I'm going to do it backwards. I'm going to set up what I want the end to look like and then go back and start up the beginning. So this word has 6 letters in it, which works out pretty perfectly because we can go right between the T and the H, just like they do in the show. So I'm going to bring my camera right between the T and the H of where I want my camera to end. Okay. Now I need to set my keyframe, but I need to make sure I set this at the end of it. So all the way here at 144, I have to set my keyframe. So I'm going to click and drag or somehow get my little tick thing down here all the way to the end at 144. And when my tick thing is at the end, when I have my camera set up, I just hit S and it'll set my keyframe. So some of you are right here, like Gotham fits right inside the screen. You want to pull back a little bit more. Remember that we have our camera moving forward and we have kind of like it coming on and we see the lights flashing. So we want to leave room for that. So I pull back a little bit further and then we hit S. Okay? Think of your framing as a way that if we are kind of zoomed out a little bit, that's better than being zoomed in too much. Because if we're zoomed in too much, there's nothing we can do about that to push it back. But if we're zoomed out like this, in After Effects, I can just make that bigger, right? Right. Oops. Okay. So now we have this. Okay, so now we have this really cool just zooming into that. All right, now what I want to do is set up my lights. And to set up my lights, I don't want to do it inside this camera. If I try to do anything in this camera, sure, it'll work, but look at the perspective and the kind of distortion that I'm getting. It might give you kind of a headache to work like this. So I'm going to switch back to perspective by going to Panels, Perspective, Perspective. Okay, And then I should see, maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't. This is my camera. So that's the camera that we just animated just sitting there. So leave it there, don't mess with it. Panels perspective, perspective gets us back to the perspective view. And if we want to see what it looks like through the render view, we can switch back to that, switch back to perspective, whatever. Okay? So very easily we can swap to all these different views. So now we're going to create some lights. So watch how I create my lights. Actually, let's do the first part together, and then you can watch where I put them. So I'm going to create an area light. And I'm just pulling it back away from the word Gotham. And I'm going to set up the same settings. Okay? So remember on our lights, every area light that we do, we're going to set the decay rate to quadratic. We're going to take our intensity up a bit, maybe to 10, maybe to 100. We don't know yet. And then under mental ray, we're going to say use the light shape, and high samples are set to 1. Okay? So area light, intensity is up to like 100. Decay is quadratic. Use light shape, and high samples is 1. Okay? Every area light I use, those are the settings. Use light shape, high samples of 1. Okay? So any area light I use, I do that. Now if you set it up on one area light, as you duplicate this, all the other area lights will have the same exact setting. If we went through and we hit the render button on this, some of you may have done that, we get nothing. Why do we get nothing?
It's in Maya software.
Correct. It's in Maya software. See at the top? And we've set up everything for mental ray. So we have to choose mental ray. And then when we hit render, we might get something. We do. Hooray. Okay, now if it's too dark, what should we do?
So the intensity up.
Intensity of the light goes up. If it's too bright, intensity goes down. All right, so that stuff you know. We can play with that after. Now watch what I'm trying to do with this light. If I go to my light here, you'll see that I have one manipulator, right? I have one move tool inside here. If I hit the T key, I get 2 manipulators. So this is a different way to move lights around. Okay? So if I'm just in the regular move tool, I get this. If I hit T, I get basically 2 move tools. This one is a pointer. What do you want your light to point at? My letters. What do you want your light to originate from? Back here, wherever. Okay? Now your first light that you set up should be the halo stuff. So all those little outlines that we saw where the light was hitting off the back and the sides, that's what I want to set up first. So I'm going to make this big. I'm going to go to the front of this and I'm going to render it trying to get a nice outline of my lettering. Boom. That's how we do it. That's pretty decent. On a first try, that's never happened before. I will take my intensity up to maybe 500 and render it again, just to, again, emphasize that highlight in the background. I think that works out pretty good. Now, again, this was a mistake that is wonderful in how it made it. But that's what's going to be your goal, is that first light that you do is going to be back here. Okay? All right. So I'm going to save my file. You save your file. Lecture